ladies and gentlemen, DJ Zed featuring Purple Funk and the Political Outage, and their fresh track from their album The Early Years entitled Mini Funk Jum Punk 333V. Album dropping soon on Bandcamp. That's DJ Zed featuring Purple Mush and the Political Outrage from the album The Early Years. Greetings, friends. I am your most outrageously bizarre, outlandishly silly, and humbly, totally humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Amateur of the interweb, radio, podcast, talk show style entertainment medium. I really don't have any idea what I'm doing besides sharing with you my honest and slightly awkward self-expressivity about reality, the nature of it, and the many silly distractionary entertainments that we entertain ourselves with. Welcome to part 2 of today's ongoing ramble. I just wanted to rejoin the previous mashup of podcast thematic subsegments and continue or bring to a point a particular thought. Unless I'm totally wrong, I was on a thread that led to this conclusion. In a universe, in a world, in a nation, encouched therein, in a place we call reality, in which we ourselves, in these little talking monkey spacesuits that attenuate, broadcast, and receive data and interact with this living holographic fractal matrix we call reality around us, in a co-collaborative, co-creative effort to sort of make manifest the very thing that we're perceiving. In a universe that works like that, isn't it interesting that our political echo chambers are so perfectly, dysfunctionally, just tolerably, completely ineptly incapable of doing very much besides keeping us engaged in political cross-examination of each other and each other's righteousness, vis-a-vis the endless ideological debate that goes on. In turn, we feel adequately distracted from the facts of life that we would rather argue with each other about who is more likely to be a great puppet in the white home of puppets than we are in engaging in the actual practices, activities, exercises, and explorations of mind, body, soul that would inherently liberate us from all of this cockamamie doodad of endless life and death and eking a living through all this mishigas we call postmodern reality, right? Am I right? Case in point, dear friends, and mind you, this is a complex issue, so any commentary I make now is necessarily flattening it out. But California is being applauded on the media, both left and right, for some deep pocket investment vis-a-vis the mechanisms of government, which the right, which would criticize it, would say socialism. Never mind that Jesus might go, hey, by those measures, I might as well be called a socialist. California is controversial. It's giving, I think, forgive me if I'm incorrect in the number, $250 million, maybe it's $500 million, to its own, constituencies, its own communities within the state of California to try and, quote, fight the problem of homelessness. Now, there are many ways we can approach this issue, but my tack is this: how much is being spent in completely meaningless, other than it inculcates you and indoctrinates you, political propaganda, media broadcasts, commercials, fanfare, swag material, video rights, music rights, the whole kit and caboodle, the entire primary, secondary, tertiary levels of the political season that is a presidential election in this day and age right now. How much would you ballpark guess is being spent on that? Like some of the figures for some of the calculable expenditures out there in terms of like different groups and how much they are spending are in the multiples of billions, right? So if we were to aggregate all of it, including the ancillary stuff, the money's spent at the local level of people trying to market to their local audiences and hitch their media to the national politics. All that must be 200, 300 billion? Let's just round it up and say it's $400 billion industry this year. The 2020 election. I could be way off, right? I could be way overestimating it. Like I said, individual groups like, the DNC and or Mike Bloomberg are spending in under 10 and just around 10 billion. I think. I don't have the numbers in front of me, so I could be totally wrong. I'm pulling from, my casual observance of the reporting on it over the early stages. We'll know for sure, right? More accurately. I will know for sure more accurately. Deeper into the race, closer to November, when we start getting more and more interesting little reporting nuggets about it. And my theory about those kinds of things is if there's a reported number, you can assume that secondary, tertiary, and other ancillary costs around it or expenditures around it quadruple the number easily, right? Who knows? So let's I just said what, 400 billion? Let's round it right back down to $100 billion. Or a range between there and that. But over 100 billion is going to be spent. Some massive amount of money. Probably, and we're not even trying to calculate the dark money, right? Like the untraced money, the money that goes to politicians and never gets accounted for in any of the buckets of fundraising or political shenanigans. And you know that that's happening, right? Panama Papers leak is proof of that. Even though we don't talk about that very much anymore. Where's it going? Oh, it got bought up. So there's a documentary from one news agency, a film that's directly about it from another, and a third movie that's very indirectly about the kinds of shenanigans that the Panama Papers leak exposed. And if you know nothing of what I'm talking about, I might encourage you to go ahead and start with is it the Launderer or the Laundromat? I forget now. But I'm going to totally do the Incorrigible Mr. Zeppo's totally irrelevant movie review podcast episode about that movie. Because, holy mackerel. If I haven't already, I think I've talked about it a bit. it's just quite an interesting homage to our own criminal corruptibility as a society of people, right? And it makes light of and spoofs it, and almost so my cynical review of it, as much as I kind of applaud it for openly commenting on it, something that's been a splash, a flam, a big bash in the pan. Edit that later. What's the right wording for that phrase? A flash in the pan news item that was hot for a hot minute. The Panama Papers leak that then sort of mysteriously seemed to have fallen off of everyone's plates and has only been marginally referenced since, in my experience. Although there's plenty of people out there who are like obsessed with it, right? And are out there shouting from their virtual rooftop about it. I might be considered one of them, I suppose, because I do bring it up a lot. This movie, featuring the incomparable pair of actors, two of my absolute most favorite actors of all time, whose names completely escape me right now. Because, it's one of those days where I started with a 420 episode and I've just been going nonstop. Antonio Banderas and the incomparable, quite admirable, quite always self-transformative, why is Gene no offense to Gene Hackman, he's also very fascinatingly interesting actor. I would have used totally different words. Excuse me, but wrong name. Blessed God forgive me. I can't remember his name. Everyone, forgive me. If you're listening along, you're probably shouting his name at me. No, Brain, it is not Neil Armstrong. Thanks for that attempt. Neil deGrasse Tyson? No. Stop with the Neils. It's not a Neil, Brain. Brain, behave. Regardless, my point is, I'm going to have to do a whole special episode where I talk about it in depth. Let us move on. Why, oh why, dear friends, I posit to you, as a philosophy of politics sort of rhetorical question, why, oh why, have the Democrats bungled and bumbled and fumbled their way through this encroaching impeachment, and have yet, apparently we just now got the breaking news that yes, indeed, finally, in theory, officially tomorrow, they might really actually send the articles of impeachment over. And while there's all kinds of debate as to the reasons and the theoretical tactical value to this interesting delay, that's just the tip of the iceberg, folks. Like, the actual two articles of impeachment, I have quite a few opinions about. Like, really, you guys, that's the best you could whip up? After dear old Uncle Mueller provided you such a beautiful roadmap of as close to of a roadmap document as possible as he could, given the constraints imposed upon him by the adjustments to the investigatory, his body, his office, as altered by the Republicans, no less. Which is funny because they love to piss on Mueller's investigation and his procedures and his rules and stuff, but he was following a paradigm set forth by the GOP. But never mind. Those points are just lost, right? All that noise is right out the window. Here we are on the brink of more endless war. I'm not trying to be an alarmist. I don't think this is just a leftist, projectionist, accusatory thing. This is, there's several a documentary, not the least of which, if you've never seen Why We Fight. Let me reach over and give it where are you? Let me give it a proper citation. Winner of the Grand Jury Prize at the Sundance Film Festival, a film by Eugene Jarky, Why We Fight. Quote, according to a guy from Newsweek, Ambitious, scary, eye-opening. Looks back from a post 9/11 vantage point to see how Ike's prophecy has come horribly true. The collusion of Congress, corruptions, and the rise of unelected think tanks. This film is, for your information, several years old. Hold on a second. My eyes aren't what they used to be, and the light is dimmer than I gave myself credit for. Where is... Oh, I had this one of those fun architect lamps, and I used to have another one that would squeak a lot, and I loved that noise. And I expected / wanted this lamp to make that noise right now, and it didn't. And I'm awkwardly aww, nostalgically disappointed. 2006, Charlotte Street Films, LLC, all rights reserved. A Sony Classic Pictures release. Or Sony Pictures Classics release, sorry. If you've never seen it, go get it. It's often sitting dusty in a bin at Target or Walmart. I'm sure it must be available online in one way or another. It might even be on Netflix, Yahoo, Nuru, blah, 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 the other thing, and or YouTube. So go ahead and try to... Why We Fight. I bet if you type in Why We Fight, a film by Eugene Jarecki, Jarecki, you'll find it. And I say that because it's profound. It is not the source of my argument about the industrial military complex. It is, like Inner Worlds, Outer Worlds, one of those films that's, oh, good for them. They made something I could have, should have, would have done, given all the things I've looked into in my life, but never did, because I was busy doing other nonsensical things. And confirms that I'm not insane, that I see and have researched and have found the same kinds of evidences that lead me to the same kinds of conclusions as other people have, which is that we live in a free-range debt, slavery, a system of oppression that is contingent. And I know this is crazy and alarmist, and I'm amazed I get away with saying it. I get away with saying it, but plenty of other people have, right? Thank God for free speech. But it's contingent on profiteering on endless wars because we've been cajoled into supporting that politically. Now, the problem is, will we have the political will to put an end to it? And is Donald Trump going to prove himself to actually be a champion of the masses, a pacifist, and a lover of negotiating for peace instead of dropping bombs for profit? Or will he prove to himself to be, as others like myself have long suspected him to be, just another person enamored with the very oligarchical faux democracy brainwashing of profit is more important than anything else, therefore profiteering is, the divine right of those with all the money enough to make more profiteering possible, in which case, he's not going to deliver, right? And a second term would be as horrific, if not worse, than a first term. But I digress. We're neither here nor there yet. Go see this film. I'm holding it DVD right there. I paid for it. I bought it. I'm allowed to talk about it on my podcast radio show, which no one pays me to say a damn word on. This is my own individual free right speech words coming out of my mouth because I want to say them. So, I digress. Putting this back on the shelf. Let's acknowledge that we're getting into it. This is Good Morning Trumptopia with your ever-eccentric, radical, revolutionary, transcendentalist host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. And here is the opening sequence to that segment. A special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast. I did that thing where I had it muted and I didn't realize, and sorry. Hosted by the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Let's talk Trump. My fellow Trumptopians, where are we? On the eve, finally, after much delay and much protestation on both sides, the actual trial portion of the impeachment procedurals, empowered by the beloved Constitution, which everyone loves to love and argue about, simultaneously accusing each other of not loving it enough, as if it were a written document delivered unto us on high from God himself, which it is not, dear friends, it is not. It is an imperfect document written by a bunch of white supremacist slave owners who did not want to think of themselves as white supremacists, but by the sheer fact that they owned non-white people, were in fact de facto white supremacists. And I know that that's not a very friendly pro-America way of talking about the Founding Fathers. Let me tell you something, though, you guys. This is one of my favorite memes in the last 3 years. If you've got a problem with, like, LGBTQ and trans rights, you're in for a surprise about your Founding Fathers. They all wore rouge, wigs, makeup, powder, and high heels, because that was the fashion of the day. Real men wore wigs in civil society to represent how real of a man they were. They were wealthy enough to maintain a collection of wigs. Let's face it, folks. The human species is fucked up cuckoo nut jobs in the head. We all are a little fucked up and traumatized by the very thing that we all cling to and sort of claim to adore, which is the history of our own species. Well, your own species. I say our collectively because I'm not exactly separate from it, but that's a whole nother episode, right? I digress. We are all our own crazy weirdness. And everybody's got a theory, right, about what is or is not going on in this shared hallucination we call reality. And my own thesis is unusually bizarre. But politically, I want to return to that particular section of the spectrum there. Politically, I think you can accuse me of being a crazy nutjob about all kinds of things. Politically, I think I'm pretty fairly square in the center going, both y'all are crazy. All directions on the spectrum. I'm dead in the center going, explicitly, in my humble opinion, politely, in my humble opinion, appropriately, in my humble opinion, saying we don't so much need politics as we need civic organization. And let's wrap our brains around that instead of waste all this money and time and effort with this bullshit treadmill product we've been sold called politics. Because $250 million is going to probably, and forgive my cynicism here, California, my home state, I love you. I love being able to say I'm broadcasting to you sort of semi-live. Wow, I really butchered that one. I am the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, broadcasting to you directly from the sunny shores and hillsides of sunny Southern California. And I love this place. But I love the actual dirt, the ground, the rocks, the trees, and the sky above them more than any of the ideological junket that they call California. And so when I say that it's both great and it's cynically lame of California spending $250 million or $500 million to try to fight a problem that our own system creates. Because let's put a pause in everything and be clear, friends. I cannot agree or capitulate to the notion that a homeless person deserves their homelessness through some sort of inherent failure of their own. Yes, of course, a person's choice-making may compound the problems they encounter in life and or create them. But as someone who has themselves teetered on the brink of fully falling into the gaping maw of this life-destroying vacuum force called homelessness, and has survived coming that close to the brink of it, and I'm not ashamed to say it, more than once have I faced that scary and frightening reality in this beautiful golden state of ours. I've also looked around at the way reality is organized. And it is not by accident that the system seems to churn out these victimized communities everywhere, no matter where you go. No matter what is or is going or is not going on in the economy of a given community, there is homelessness. Have you ever noticed that? It's like in California, it's easy to blame it on high rent, high real estate that edges people out. And by all means, I'm not trying to minimize that. That is happening. That happens all the time. Right now, today, there are countless, probably hundreds of thousands of people who are living, as I've just described, on the very edge of losing the home, the place, the box, the free-range, self-imposed debt prison cubicle that protects them from the elements. And that's just a hard, cold fact reality, right? It's easy to blame it on the weird, crazy, inflationary, upward mobility, impossible to keep up with growth of real estate pricing. But even in communities where real estate is cheap and rent is relatively much lower than California's, there are still homeless people suffering in the streets, in the shadows, being neglected. And I'm not trying to stigmatize them. I'm trying to remind all of us as a collective that, yes, we are indeed our brother's keepers, and that the politicians who claim to be Bible-reading, theologically intelligent, God-fearing Christians are not, in fact, in any way, shape, or form enacting policies that accurately represent that which Jesus would do if he were elected into those offices. Because the person that we identify with and label Jesus, the persons that we might also recognize and acknowledge and indicate with the labels Yeshua, Christos, and Mary Magdalene, or however we'd like to pronounce them, because I like to toy with that notion that it's like it doesn't matter, right? They're just labels. Those aren't even their names. Those people would have, without profiteering on it, healed, fed, housed, clothed, bathed those indigent people. Is Donald Trump doing that? No, he's sending our troops off to more war and assassinating people with drones and making that more normal than it ever was before, which is really weirdly ironic because wasn't the GOP and the Republican base all up in arms and materially, like, incendiarily offended at Obama for basically quietly doing the same thing for 8 years? So I just think it's curious that no matter what words come out of their mouths and what curious ideological constructs their fan bases fervently believe about them or around them or in adjunct to them, their most favorite political puppet, ultimately, even the Trumps and even, dare I say it, I think if Bernie Sanders were in office long enough, my theory would bear out. Even the Bernie Sanders types in the world don't actually do anything effective to end the endless wars. Don't actually ever do anything effective to end the endless problem of ever-increasing homelessness. They never actually do anything to end the endless problem of this or that or name the other. Because it's a treadmill, waste your time, clusterfuck kind of game of take your money and run and garner your power, isn't it? And it's not anything at all about solving problems. So, my friends, I humbly submit to you, and have been for several years now, even long before I started this podcast, I submit to you the very wild and crazy idea that we might want to spiritually and practically, let us say politically, abdicate politics. We should give up on politics as it operates entirely. Sanction it, ridicule it, exorcise it from our minds and our systems, and focus on civic organization. If those words don't make sense to you, I don't know what else to say. Besides, you've been drinking the Kool-Aid, I think. I don't know. But I'm going to wrap up this particular block of Good Morning Trumptopia and ask you, dear listeners, to ask yourselves, why hasn't he already been impeached effectively, with authority, with clarity, with power, given the simple and obvious facts that he literally has been committing the crimes that we, those on the side of opposition to his presidency, have accused him of committing? The evidence is there. He is impeachable, and should would have been already authoritatively and very cleanly removed from office earlier this year. I don't want to be crazy and say it should have happened sooner than that, because that would have been politically unwise, right? But as soon as this, like all of what's happening now, coulda, shoulda, would have started this last year cycle and have been building up to something the beginning of this year, 2019. It didn't. And the Democrats have, in whatever charming, we wear the white hat, we're the good guys fighting the good fight kind of way, fumbled the football and kicked the can down the yardage, down the road, long enough to make this an interesting drama right up against the election. And let us remember, folks, for those of you who are not aware, I am on the side or in the team of people who generally, whatever other things we might disagree on, agree around this single principle. If they're even on the ticket, if their name gets on the ballot to running up to becoming the candidate, they've already been preemptively selected for whatever reasons and nefarious purposes by those we call, quote unquote, the bad guys. That, my friends, includes Donald Trump and always has, had to have had. There's no way that the Illuminati or whoever have been so good at running things, not just for the last 100 years since World War I, right? Because that's about 100 years ago now, but because and the origins of all that come from whatever 60 years prior. But they've been running it for millennia since. And my thesis, for those of you who are not aware, as of yet, but forgive me for those who this is repetition, in my thesis, those who we might label the black hats, the team evil, right? The bad guys, those in the shadows that are truly in control of this open air, comfort and division-driven debt, slavery, self-imposed prison of comfort. They've been in control of things in a sort of both politically, practically, pragmatically, and empirical way, and energetic way, spiritual way, since the Tower of Babel was destroyed, whenever the fuck that actually happened. And that is the latest madness from behind the orange wall. Thank you for listening to GMT, a special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast. Stay woke, Trumptopia. Stay woke.